4:58.
Okay, here we go.
Karen's still working. She doesn't have access to that.
Is that just the login on the TV?
It's a login on this computer. She was the previous town administrator.
So they didn't reset it to be
Oh, yeah, and then,
the generic admin login?
and then, there's a woman, Darlene, whose name comes up on other things, and then the one before that comes up on other
Oh
things.
yeah, this is going back a decade.
These are things we can fix.
Well, I'd love help with that.
I'm happy to help there.
Hang on, let me get this going. We're almost there. Come on, Amy. Okay, that was painful. Okay,
It being 5 o'clock, I called the select board meeting to order. Changes or additions to the agenda. There's an abatement for map 214. Hold on. 1 second.
yeah, 217, it's a camper. No, it's not, it's a utility.
Is it map 214?
217, it's utility, so the numbers are very different.
Okay, so map 214, lot 17, sublot 1. In the amount of $31.63. New business. We'll start off with the department head report with the code compliance agent, Ed Matone.
Yes.
Take it easy.
Nothing really to report other than, we just started this, my position off the ground recently. Being the first compliance officer in town, I'm seeking out training for myself. Reached out to DES, made contact with them. I got myself on a list for future training. Right now there's nothing scheduled, but I'm on the list and they'll notify me when the next training is available with regards to groundwater protection. Also, brought to my attention, New Hampshire Municipal Association has a code enforcement workshop in June. I'm going to register for that when that pops up, when I'm eligible to register. Other than that, in the meantime, I'm seeking my counterparts' advice or input from towns around us. Reached out to Effingham and Center Harbor. Getting feedback was slow coming, so I might tickle the wire and push that a little harder. Limited amount of information coming through that. Other than that, I'm going through the list of businesses in town and trying to identify who's in the groundwater protection district and identify who's who and maybe put together a kind of a bullet point self-checklist. Maybe I can have them review themselves, introduce myself, and get this checklist in their hands, and maybe they can do an initial self-inspection and followed up by inspection with me down the road. Other than that, I'm hoping for any input and moving along.
Been in touch with the planning board. Didn't they develop a list of businesses within the?
Yeah, that's the list he's working on.
Oh, okay, all right.
We had a meeting with the groundwater committee, which is planning board representatives, conservation commission representatives, about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Oh, great.
So that was a good kickoff.
Yeah. All right.
Any other questions?
Carry on.
Thanks.
Is there anything you need from us?
Everything, but I'll figure it out. I'll pick your brains down the road, but yeah. Like I said, I'm getting my feet wet, so
Yeah.
trying to figure it out.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in tonight. I'm gonna move on to the junkyard report with Charlie Townsend.
Yeah, that's me. Came in to report that there isn't much to report. But partly because it's winter, for a couple reasons that makes it a little tougher to see, but also I've got like this other job. And so I hope to kind of get back into it in the spring and see if we can pick up where we left off. I'm not absolutely convinced that my general approach has been taking things by storm, but yeah, I'm not giving up on that yet. Now that I've got some details written down from Ed, I think Ed, you and I can probably compare some notes,
Sure.
perhaps.
Yeah.
There's some differences, and Richard has pointed out that I think these positions are separate based on enabling legislation, things like that, as far as their establishment, but I can't imagine there won't be some overlap,
Yeah.
so just so that we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, glad to.
And compare notes, so that'd be good. We could probably
Okay.
talk more off meetings, so to
Okay.
speak. But, and I guess I've stopped and talked to Keith every now and then, let her know what, things, either problems I've come across or little updates as we go, and I'll certainly continue to do that. Unless there's other questions along those lines.
It might be a good idea, particularly being sort of new and sort of, one-person departments. It's easy to feel like isolated and alone and stuff. So if you think it would be useful to sit down once every X, once a month, twice a month, whatever, with a representative of the select board, just let me know. I'd be happy to do that, so that everybody understands we're all in one team.
Yeah, and we might coordinate for that too, just
Yeah,
so that you're not going through the same sort of thing, et cetera.
If you want to pick one day a month or 2 days a month, and we'll just make it a regular thing if you want.
Like that idea. Right.
Any other questions for Charlie?
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming in tonight. Appreciate it. Probably with the snow melting, things will be kicking off here pretty quick.
Yeah. I imagine.
Everything looks so nice when it's covered with snow.
I'm gonna move on to the sewer commission update with the interim chair, Grant Prillam.
Relevant. So, thank you. Hillary Bear, who's our chair, is out for a little while, right, Granddad?
Right.
So I've got the dubious distinction award. And she had come in, I wasn't able to make it that day at the last minute, and given you an update before, and I wanted to start that practice. After all, we work under you guys, and you should know what's going on and what's coming up. So I don't know exactly how much information she had given you. We had a meeting scheduled with DES on February 1st after almost a year, and now it has been a year since we requested a meeting with them. The administrator for the subsurface system division got sick, and mid-February I started reaching out to him to say, can we schedule this meeting? I did finally hear back from him, and he's on medical leave till the middle of this month, so maybe by the end of the month we will actually sit down with DES. This has been a long saga. I'm sure you're at least marginally aware of that. And I wanted to let you know in the meeting, we have a rather ambitious agenda. 4 items doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it's ambitious. And the first item is that we need to have the system declared back in compliance. As you know, it was declared out of compliance some time back. We've had an engineering report done, an excellent piece of work, a company called SFC. Dan Flores was the engineer on the job. He will be in the meeting with us, and we'll basically let him defend his numbers. But we have a very up-to-date profile of the system, the users, the usage, and we want to come out of that meeting with compliance. That may be a little optimistic in the moment, but it shouldn't be too long after that. There have been a number of issues that they've raised, which I think we've now addressed in part with help from Ms. Johnston, the town attorney, and through Dan and so on. The other person in the meeting, Genevieve Christie, who's our secretary, the other person will be a gentleman named David, whose last name escapes me, that's old age, from Lakes Region Planning Commission. And he's largely coming in as a support figure. He doesn't have a specific role except to say, yes, get on with it. And we're hopeful that that will be helpful, and he's been doing homework and getting up to speed. Another item on the agenda is that we want to get the system measured via the effluent meter that was installed when it was rebuilt. Our understanding is that there is nothing in code which prohibits using an effluent meter. It's a rule or regulation that was promulgated by an incoming secretary. And through Ms. Johnston, we have the information we need to file a waiver if there's any great reluctance on their part. We actually use, according to the meter, about a quarter to a third of the capacity of the system. So to say that we're on the edge of compliance is not in keeping with reality, it's in keeping with book values. And most of what they look at is formulaic, which doesn't really matter in a real-time sense. And just as an aside, we know that Lakes Region Water serves this area. They have about 85, 87 customers here in the greater metropolitan Tamworth area. And all of our ratepayers are within that. And their total is 8,000 gallons for their 85, 87 customers. So I think we're on pretty firm ground in saying, come on guys, let's have, what we would like is a process and a timeline. How long do you want us to read the meter? How often? Over what time period? And let's move on. And if things get bad, this is where you need to be apprised. We may need to be filing a waiver, and baseball season is coming, and hardball is, I think, maybe on the horizon. Two other things that we're going to bring to the meeting, actually asking them for something. One is that we've been wrestling with developing a new ordinance for the system and for us, because we don't really fit any standard regulatory definition. We are municipally owned, only we're not, and we are an individual system with multiple hookups, okay, not a waste treatment plant. And so many things, we're in this gray area from a regulatory standpoint, and it's been hard to find an ordinance and language that actually is working for what we do. And so we'd like to get their help on that. And the fourth thing that we'd like to ask them for is their application forms for change of use. Because again, what we have is old, people still have to go to DES even when they come through us. We want to know what they want, and to try and streamline that process. For now we have 4 or 5 projects that are just waiting. And I will say, just as an aside, I felt, and I think we all did on the commission, that it was a shame that the Nurse Association wound up putting in their own drain field, because they just couldn't wait around on these guys any longer for a minuscule change in flow, literally minuscule. So that's where we are. We're at a point, I figure 3rd week of March, if Mr. Hazelton hasn't reached out, I'll start that process again. We'll ask Ms. Johnston to weigh in if we're not getting a reply, and we'll start looking at next steps, seeing what happens. We're a commission for the town. The town deserves better than this. And frankly, we're pretty frustrated, and we feel like we're responding to all of their stuff, and the goalposts keep moving. So we're hoping that we can set those in concrete and get this back where it needs to be. And by the way, the system, we've put a lot of resources into it, and it's in excellent shape. Everything's up to date and working fine. So there's my update. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions if you have.
Do you have any idea of how successful waiver attempts are typically?
I don't, and it's generally at least a two-step process. We would file a waiver if it is, and this would be around the effluent meter. If that's denied, then there's an appeal process. So I would imagine it takes time. Ultimately, it could wind up in a court. But we don't want an adversarial relationship. We just want something to happen.
Yeah.
And at least give us clear definitions. Some of the questions that they've asked us, we've answered, and they're ancient history. They're not relevant to the current numbers and the current situation. We've answered their questions, I think. I think we have everything that they want, but we'll just have to see. So I can't give you a good answer.
No, that's okay. I just wasn't sure if we the first people to try to do this, or.
No, I doubt it. I'm sure waivers are relatively common. I don't know in terms of an effluent meter, but I'm sure there are other things like size of a system or design elements, things like that. Engineering details that people want a waiver.
It's just
on.
crazy making that we have solid numbers and they're not accepted, so I'm wondering if there's
Well, we
other-
really do now. I think the numbers were kind of fuzzy at times. There were different methodologies used, but I have to say Mr. Flores really did an excellent job. We've got aerial maps, overlays, and he did an excellent job, and we should be able to walk out. Our feeling is all of the other tables, charts, numbers are to a large degree irrelevant at this point. We have the updated numbers. That's what needs to be approved. And there's even been contention about, well, is it 2016 or 2019? Who cares? This is 2024.
Right.
And these are good, solid, it's a good, solid piece of work from SFC, so.
Once the meeting is scheduled, if you could let us know, if you think it would be useful to have a select board representative, I'll bet you could get one.
That's, yes, of course.
And if you,
I'll talk to the others, but my
and if
first.
DES continues to dither on having a meeting, if you could let us know as well, because there's
Yes.
ways to apply pressure through our legislative representatives to make it happen, perhaps.
Yeah, that was also on our list of what comes next.
Yeah.
So, at least, at a minimum, we wanted you all to be aware that we're not just sitting around paying bills and meeting once a month. We have been really trying to work on this, and a lot has gone into the system itself. It needed to. Things wear down. So.
We appreciate the work.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
You mentioned attorney. Who's paying the attorneys?
That comes out of our budget.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are funds that we appropriated, and we've built in additional funds in the budget that's coming next week, the warrant article, because we anticipated the possibility of at least needing to spend. Yeah. And the town does not put money into our budget.
That's why I'm
Right,
asking.
right.
Any other questions for Kurt? Thank you for coming in tonight.
Thank you, Ken.
I'm gonna move on to the Energy Committee with Gabrielle Watson, Chair, and Andrew Hatch, Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire.
Well, thank you. It's been a little bit since we've been before you. I'm here to talk about the Community Power Program, which we're on target to launch this June to get everybody signed up for it, assuming that it passes at the town meeting. But first I wanted to do a very quick PSA, which is a save the date. We are confirmed with a date with Club Motorsports to have an electric vehicle expo, which is going to be both electric vehicles and classic cars on May 5th, which is a Sunday. And so if anybody has a classic car or has an electric vehicle that they would like to offer up to be on display and answer questions to people who are curious about them, please get in touch with the Energy Committee. So that's my PSA. I'm here with Andrew Hatch, who's a representative from the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire and has traveled some distance to be with us tonight, which we're grateful. He was also part of the 2 public hearings that we hosted when we were talking about the plans for doing community power. Since then, we've completed the drafting of our plan. We've submitted it to the Public Utilities Commission. The Public Utilities Commission on February 13th approved our plan. And so we're now on track with a couple following steps to be launching the program by the end of June of this year. So the next step is next week at town meeting. There's a warrant article for the town to adopt the plan. If that's approved, then the next step is for the select board to approve the operational plans and policies and contracts related to operating the system. We go through a process of defining what kind of base rate we want. Then CPCNH begins sending out emails to customers who then have a month to decide, do they want to opt out of the program? Do they want to opt up to a higher level of renewable energy, 30%, 50%, 100% if they want. And then by the end of March, everybody begins to get enrolled who has opted in to the program. There's a couple exceptions, we can talk about that. But that's the game plan from here on out. So we're here tonight to share with you the operating agreements and the operational policies so that you can become versed with them. And our request is that, not tonight, but in 2 weeks, that you be prepared to say, yes, we're fine with these. And so the policies have to do with what's a fair and reasonable sharing of responsibility of costs between the town and the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. How do we, what are the services that the CPCNH is going to provide to the town in terms of procuring energy and providing billing services and customer service? And then what are the policies that CPCNH is going to provide in terms of how do they set their rates, how do they manage data, I'm forgetting some of the other policies, but Andrew's going to talk in detail about those in a minute. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight, is like give you guys the lay of the land about what we're asking you. We are going to be, the intent is for the town to enter into a contract with CPCNH by the 28th of March. We're going to ask you to authorize Keats to be the authorized officer to execute that contract with your permission.
Even though I can't sign it on the 21st? So I won't be here.
That's right. Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the documents we're gonna ask you to sign, it's actually Emery who's gonna be the
Okay.
person to sign it as the chair of the select board. And we're gonna ask you which authorities you want to delegate to Keats in terms of what kinds of decisions she can make on your behalf. We're gonna recommend that you delegate one of the 3 options. So that one is very basic, like should we launch or should we not launch? The question there is CPCNH less expensive than Eversource? The answer is yes, and we should launch. And that's a very basic decision point. There isn't a whole lot of ambiguity there. The other ones are more complicated about what kind of rates we might want to set in the future, what kind of services we might want in the future. That, I think, really belongs in the jurisdiction of the select board to deliberate when those moments come in the future, and should rightly belong in a deliberative process. So that's my recommendation as chair of the Energy Committee, but that's what we're asking you to decide by 2 weeks from now, when you come back together. I have a handout about like what are the decisions that we're asking you to make. I'll pass those around, but I think that's the basics of what I wanted to do And Andrew is going to walk through what are in the agreements, the cost sharing agreement, the service agreement, and the various policies that are involved in that.
I did give each select board member a copy of the deck.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Great.
so I have-
Okay, so that's what Andrew is gonna walk through now.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to come to meet you all. As Gabrielle said, I have been here a couple of times to attend the public hearings, and delighted that the process has got thus far. Everything we're talking about tonight obviously is a condition on a positive vote next week, but again, why we're here to discuss this ahead of time is because there is an opportunity for Tamworth to get on deck for the next launch. The Community Power Coalition only launched its first communities under a year ago. The April was the first billing period for the 12 that launched initially. We have had another group that went through this process this time last year, and 12 communities went to town meeting and received a positive vote, and they have just got on to launch this March. So they've had a year to wait. As we have built the coalition and the paperwork and the documentation, we are in a stronger position to provide fast-track opportunities. But I would stress that what you are asking your legislative body to vote on next week is the approval of the electric aggregation plan and to empower the Board of Selectmen to act at their discretion on the launching of community power. So please don't feel pressurized by this, but the opportunity to be able to launch as early as June does put us in a tight time frame. The conversation thus far has been to get the town aware of community power in general and to understand how it works through the coalition. You're, I'm sure, aware that we're a non-profit. We are subject to right-to-know laws and full disclosure, and all of the policies and documentation that were discussed tonight is freely available on the website, and is something that we've worked to craft with the long-term future of the coalition in mind. The action of being a non-profit means that instead of us keeping a lot of things sort of under wraps and just coming up with numbers that we know what goes into them, that's not how the coalition works. So it's very transparent. So one of the things that I keep hearing about is cost sharing, and then I get a select board saying, I didn't think this was going to cost the town anything, and it doesn't, because the cost sharing is not the cost of launching and maintaining community power in Tamworth. It's the allocation of those costs that go to developing the whole program across all of its members, and the fair allocation of costs and the clear allocation of costs across those members, so no one member is burdened with those of another community. We are at an early stage, and so things are, at this stage, relatively simple in terms of there is one set of rates. We map our rates to the 6-month cycle of the utilities. We know what the rates are right now. The new rates came into force in February and will endure through July 31st. So Gabrielle was talking about the possibility of the appointment of Keats as the authorised officer to make a go, no-go decision. In the scenario we're discussing, the rate that we are offering is undercutting that of Eversource, albeit that Eversource's rate is artificially low for this next 6 months because they have applied a 1.5 cent discount or rebate to its customers, having discovered that they've been overcharging you in the past. I would anticipate that after the next 6-month period that starts in August, that we would probably see a more normal delta between that of the coalition's rates and that of Eversource. The other three utilities all came out in the sort of high 9s to mid 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and our base rate is 8.1. So it's 10 to 20%, and that's what we have seen in the past. But anyway, these documents that you are aware of, I don't know if these have been circulated yet, but they are in your possession, are the documents that are, they drive all of the communities, and they're all adopted universally. So one thing to make clear, we would strongly recommend that you talk to legal counsel and get any input from independent viewpoint. But these have been adopted now by 28 communities, and they are a document that is not up for redlining or debate. They are, and by nature, have to be the same for everybody. But as members of the coalition, we very much look forward to and already benefiting from the town of Tamworth's input. Gabrielle has been very involved and very engaged with the coalition. We will be having our annual general meeting in April, and Tamworth has a vote to elect new members of the board. 1/3 of the board and 1/3 of all of our operating committees will turn over each year. And we would very much welcome Tamworth's involvement at that level. The reason I mention this is because these policies are being developed and managed by volunteer groups that are all staffed or populated by members of the coalition. So one of the two main committees that meet and deal with the ongoing procurement of electricity is the Risk Management Committee. There's obviously a Finance Committee, and then there's a board and an Executive Committee. And all of the process by which we procure power and approve the purchase of power is done with the expertise that's afforded us by partnering with third-party groups like Ascend Analytics, who will speak with our risk management group and advise them as to the landscape in terms of power procurement. It's a fairly complex area, I'm sure you appreciate. And one of the fundamental reasons why community power can offer a preferential rate is because of our power procurement process and strategy. Eversource is not permitted to operate in that way. As a regulated utility, their role in providing default power is that they procure power twice a year on a date certain, and whatever the prevailing rates on that day, they pass through to the customers. The coalition procures power on a more ongoing rolling basis to ensure that we can meet the growing demand of our customer base, but also to buy contracts at the most preferential time, so that when it does come to a rate setting period, we are in a strong position to make those offer those discounts. And as Gabrielle said, the cornerstone of community power is it will not launch unless the prevailing rate is lower than that of the utilities. We intend to maintain those rates at a competitive rate. We can't make a cast iron guarantee that the rates will never be slightly higher than the utilities, but it's certainly not our intention. And going back again to the voluntary nature of community power, albeit that the community will be opted into a new default rather than it being a voluntary opt-in program, everybody has the opportunity to step out of the program and not participate at any time. So clearly, if rates were to go higher, folks would probably be interested in stepping out. But that is not a scenario that we foresee happening. And my point to you is that these policies sometimes get into areas that we're really not involved in right now. Going back to power procurement, we, in our portfolio risk management policies talk about how we procure power, and we are procuring power through a variety of instruments. But the longest horizon for procurement is 36 months. But most of what we do is much shorter than that, around the time when new contracts are being purchased, new launches are happening, because obviously we're growing fast. That's when we're buying most of our power. So any sort of commitments that are being made on behalf of the town of Tamworth are more often on the short side than the long side. But when we talk about the whole picture, we have to be careful about what we express in terms of what you're committing to. So I hope that that's a little bit of way of teeing this up. What we've provided to be a sort of ride-along with the policies and agreements themselves is this slide deck. And this brings out the key points of what you will be being asked to approve. The only things that require a signature are the documents, which are the cost-sharing agreement and accompanying documentation. And what has been provided to the town is a personalised or a customised version of this cost-sharing agreement. It has everything entered where it's pertinent to the town of Tamworth. It's got all of the necessary dates of you joining the coalition through the Joint Powers Agreement and so forth. There is just therefore 2 pages in particular that require your attention once we've got through to that point. One is to agree to the cost-sharing agreement, and the other is to agree to the what we call the complete service bundle, which is all of the just agreeing to all of the terms and saying you understand all of the policies. So we try and make that as a simple list as possible. So if you do have your slide deck available, then I'd be happy just to walk you through that. Does that make sense as the next step? Unless anybody has any questions to start. Okay.
Makes sense to me.
So we'll keep it simple. We'll go to the 3 R's. That's risks, rates, and reserve policies. So as I said before, the whole notion is that we are what is called we have to provide all requirements electricity. We can't discriminate, we can't pick certain groups or categories. We have to provide a full portfolio of services and meet all of the obligations that are set by state statute. And our role in obtaining the best rates and maintaining rate stability is key to the whole principle of the coalition. I mentioned that as we are a non-profit, all of the costs associated with launching a program, maintaining a program, funding a program, and funding the purchase of power for the future is all borne by the revenues that are coming in from participating customers. There is no cost or liability to the town of Tamworth. In fact, our rules say that you cannot expend anything more than the more de minimis things such as legal review. If you get to the point of stepping forward to launch, we would support you in all of those aspects in terms of sending this mailer out to every customer. And there's an example of cost sharing, because each town or city, community is a different size. So those costs of launching and communicating with your customers differs from town to town. We wouldn't burden you with the cost of launching, and obviously until such time as the revenues start to flow in from Tamworth, there is a deficit. But that deficit will be booked and recorded, and in fact it will be recouped over a 3 to 4 year period. So in the sense of how much that is against the incoming revenues, it's a very small number, but we will just make sure that it doesn't adversely impact you in any way. But as revenues start to come in, you'll start to see not only customer savings, which are just, obviously the difference between the prevailing retail rates and that which the coalition charges. And that's the benefit to the customer, but then there's the additional benefit of what we call reserves. And those reserves are the difference between the cost of running the coalition plus the cost of procuring the power, and the difference between those two numbers and the actual charge, the rate that we're charging. In a for-profit company, that would take in as profit. In a non-profit, it is recorded and credited to the town of Tamworth, and those reserves will grow. The purpose of those reserves is to primarily ensure, as I just said, rate stability, and looking forward, have enough cash on hand for the coalition to be able to become, it's called a load-serving entity. It's the future. It's when we have achieved 3 years of auditable books and we have 120 days cash on hand. That puts us in the strongest position to procure power at the most beneficial rates. We cut out all the middle folks. And that means that the future gets even more promising in terms of the delta between what the prevailing utility rates will be and those that the coalition can offer. So I just wanted to sort of set that little scene. So a lot of what we're talking about in the risk rates and reserves policies are all about what I've just mentioned, how the money is allocated and how we mitigate risk. Again, because you signed a joint powers agreement, there is no implied risk at any time to the town of Tamworth. There isn't a scenario where you would be on the hook to owe money to anybody. However, what we need to make sure is the coalition strategies don't burden anybody, and we need to articulate these very clearly. So we have the energy portfolio risk management policy, which explains all of the financial safeguards and the transparency in reporting. We have the financial reserves policy that describes how reserves are maintained and all the mechanisms of how those reserves will be managed. It talks about a concept of excess reserves allocated to members. I don't want to get way ahead of my skis here. I just said, it's going to take us a number of years to get to anywhere close to having these financial stability that we strive for before we would be looking to excess. But there is a policy, because we've seen, for example, in California, where community power has been operating for 20 years, that they're talking about billions of dollars on deposit, many millions of dollars in helping to develop local energy projects. So this gets big quite fast. I mean, just in the first operating months of 2023, we generated $9 million in customer benefits and reserves. And so the momentum of this is fast. Our estimated revenues in 2024 will be closing in on $100 million. And we anticipate on top of that launching more communities. Right now, with the March group, we have 120,000 customers, which means that we're larger than all of the utilities except for Eversource in 9 months. It's not something that's going to continue exponentially, because obviously there is a lot of interest that we've been meeting, but the second and third and fourth waves are now starting to get on deck. And as we develop more buying power, it only goes to help the members. The retail rates policy is how the rates are set and what kinds of rates will be offered. Again, as I said, right here, right now, there's one rate for everybody. That is the rate that is set every 6 months and tracks to the utilities procurement process. I perhaps misspoke. There are 4 rates, but they are based upon a base rate, and then there is higher levels of renewable power that residents can opt up to if they so choose. But in the future, there could be a wide range of optional rates that may come to pass. We do service, for example, wholesale customers, folks who are in the business category. But right now, we just do what the utilities do, which is just match those default rates that are on monthly variable. But we would like to introduce some rates that perhaps, I'm not sure municipally what Tamworth does if you have a third-party supplier for your electricity, but many municipalities do. And we want to be able to offer rates that sort of map to that, so that we can bring as many of the participants in a town into the fold of the coalition. So that's what it means about future rates. The little block graph here is what I was talking about, of building that 120 days cash on hand. So, just to run through briefly the main points of the portfolio risk management policy. It's all about the philosophy, how we go about procuring electric supply, what those risk exposures are, and how we mitigate those risks. It talks about the strategies, how we measure the performance, and what limits we put on to the positions in advance of power delivery. This gets very wonky very fast, but it's all in there, and I can only reiterate that this has been under scrutiny for over a year. 28 communities have already participated in this. The only thing we have updated since this was formed was the cost-sharing agreement, but purely because we have brought into the fold counties along with towns and cities. And the county model, which there isn't one in this area yet, is just another component, so we had to amend the policy. But everything else has remained the same as when we launched. The important thing about maintaining risk is that you provide a lot of checks and balances and third-party reviews. Again, there's a lot of information in there about who's responsible for what is the chain of command, who makes the decisions, and how it will be third-party audited. And so, again, describes how independent audit will happen every 2 years, for example. The retail rates policy, again, just all the objectives, authorities, and processes for rate setting. The fact that it will only launch if the rates beat the utility rates, that the board would approve any amendments to the policy, and that the default rate setting process is the CEO in consultation with the Finance Risk Management Committee and the Emergency Default Rate Adjustment Authority is a group who, again, are just there as a backstop. We're trying to think of things that are highly unlikely but possible. We don't want to act recklessly. As we grow, it's more and more critical that we keep a very close eye on all eventualities. The reason that many of us became very aware of electricity rates was that in the late part of 2022, when the rates went through the roof, it was due to some very remote actions in other parts of the world that created a perfect storm, and it resulted in the worst case scenario for the utilities, who could just only procure power on a day, and it was a very bad day. We are always looking at these externalities to make sure it won't impact our stability and our creditworthiness. We are, as I said earlier, governed by state statute and required to provide the minimum compliance of renewables. We are heavily sort of monitored that we make sure that we do that, and when Tamworth launches, there will be a environmental disclosure statement as part of this document that goes out to the public. This just identifies our products and how they meet the renewable portfolio standard, and how the higher levels of renewables are articulated. The financial reserves policy, again, I've talked about this already. I don't want to be too repetitious, but we've got the joint reserves, which are the ones I was describing, but then we have discretionary reserves. This isn't something that's actually been actioned yet by the coalition, but we do intend to operate with a discretionary reserve option in the fall of this year, I anticipate. It's a concept that on top of the rate, so we've got 8.1 cents, you as Tamworth Community Power could elect by mutual approval to put an adder on that, to put a tenth of a cent, just picking a number out of the air, and that would be a dedicated fund for Tamworth. We would obviously receive the revenues and then we'd allocate that tenth of a cent to Tamworth, and it would be something that, as the select board, would make a decision on with the Energy Committee on what sort of fundraising you were trying to do with that money, but it would be your money to spend at your discretion. It's not something we really need to get into today, but it's just something I wanted to explain that there's a difference.
And I just want to say that is one of the authorities that we could delegate to the authorized official. In this case, Keats, if you, that's what the direction that you want to go. And our recommendation as a committee would be that you reserve that authority for yourselves to make those kinds of decisions, because it really is about, do we want to raise money and what do we want to do with that money? And that's a big decision that I think should be deliberated.
Certainly the conversations that have been going on in coalition members, and the only ones that are really thinking about this initially are the ones who have independently made previous town-wide declarations of an intention to reach 100% renewables by a certain date and things like that. I think it's personally a fairly, it's something you really need to talk carefully through with everybody in town and be on board with before you embark on that. But it's just one of these options, one of these tools, one of the future things that are going to be coming across the coalition. But again, the reserves policy is to make sure that we've got stability, cash on hand, great credit rating so we can move to be a load-serving entity and ensure the long-term financial stability of CPC&H. The rights of members to reserve contributions, the reserves tracked by member. If a member departs, the balance of reserves will be returned to the member. That again is something to bear in mind, that you are part of a slice of a pie. This pie is being grown by the membership as a whole, but it is allocated by community, and it's on a proration based upon the amount of power that's procured in total and your percentage of that. So we do have, we're talking for a long time about theory with very little to prove, otherwise everybody had to just sort of believe us. But I'm delighted to say that the first year's financial results are starting to come through, and as I said earlier, we do have now reserves broken out by community, and towns of even a modest size such as Harrisville and Plainfield are seeing hundreds of thousands of dollars in reserves already accruing. Data privacy and security policy, obviously it's fairly self-explanatory. We maintain a strong separation of confidential customer data and the operations of the coalition. Tamworth Community Power will be the entity that serves Tamworth through the coalition. It's not appropriate for folks to know confidential data about their friends and neighbours. So we act in that sort of role of keeping a very clear delineation. We have some very strong safeguards. We partner with third parties in order to make sure that we have the professional expertise necessary, but also as the coalition grows, we can make the choice to bring it in-house if it makes sense, or if not, we outsource it and keep the overheads of the coalition at the minimum. But the folks who manage all the data, Calpine Services, have been doing this and do it for many other community power organizations across the country, and they have passed muster with all of the state and federal data privacy regulations. So that's a very strong importance for us. and legal compliance to make sure that we're keeping everybody in compliance. So those are the policies. And then we've got the cost sharing agreement and member services contract. There's a lot of information here. I'm not going to read you every line because unless you have questions, but I'm going to go through the categories. So again, the cost sharing agreement ensures costs recovered fairly and proportionally from members. So there's a full menu of services, and on this little chart you can see here, this is straight from the cost sharing agreement. This is what we're talking about with cost sharing, and defining the difference between general and administrative. Direct project costs, there's one. We haven't got any projects yet, but the project conversation is already moving forward. If the area up here, there was some participating communities who develop a project, we need to keep that separate from the whole picture. The member services, procurement of power and supply, the member services operations, and then the member services elective services for again, provisioning for future things that haven't happened yet. So, the cost sharing agreement is very detailed but pretty straightforward. It's explaining who are the members, what the member menu of services are, and what it requires to launch and operate the program. Reiterates the fact that no taxpayer funds or costs are recovered through municipal members, and making sure that all the debts, liabilities and obligations of CPC&H will not be those of the members unless otherwise agreed. Much of that is actually the same language in the joint powers agreement you've already entered into. I mentioned earlier, we are subject to right to know laws, mandating transparency and monthly reporting. All of our meetings are open to the public. There's typically a Zoom link on our calendar on the homepage, and people can zoom in, and all of our budgets, performances and everything are posted on our website. Again, to remain completely open for inspection at all reasonable times. The cost of implementation is what I touched on earlier. All members participating during 1 to 5 years have the same dollars per megawatt hour implementation and startup costs, meaning that those costs to get you up and running will be amortized and not burden you up front. Cost classifications and general terms and conditions are just sort of explaining in more detail what I've just covered. And then the member service contract for the complete service bundle. Some of this terminology is a bit arcane, and I apologize for that. I didn't write it, but I can certainly do my best to explain it. The recitals in the exhibits are just to make sure that the town understands that it's expressing its desire to implement community power for the public good, that it's adopted its electric aggregation plan, it endorses the CPC&H policies, and is desiring CPC&H to provide service. So that's you giving the green light for us to move forward. The commitment is that CPC&H will provide comprehensive services for power supply and will enable oversight and transparency. So, again, I don't need to go through this list of Exhibit 3 again, other than just to say it's a carefully laid out framework of who does what and what responsibilities are lying in terms of CPC&H and that of the community in terms of authorization. It memorializes your electric aggregation plan, which I must stress is a living document. It can change and probably will as we evolve. It has, as Gabrielle said, been pre-approved by the Public Utilities Commission. We did that again to allow the opportunity for Tamworth to expedite launch. If you get a positive vote next week, we will notify, or you will actually notify, with my help, the Public Utilities Commission that it's now been approved, because the legislative body are the ones that matter They've just made sure it passes muster by the rules and regulations.
And I just wanted to say, just really quickly, so the service contract is it's the meat and potatoes of it. It's like, they're buying electricity, they're providing customer service, they're providing the information to Eversource to put on our bills, like how much energy each customer is using, and therefore what their fee should be for energy services. So that's kind of that's the meat and potatoes of the reason why we're going into this. All of the rest of it is they're procuring energy at a better rate than what Eversource is able to, so therefore we're getting cheaper rates for our residents and our businesses and the municipality and nonprofits in town. But this is the meat and potatoes of what CPCNH is going to do. They're going to provide the wraparound services for what that means. So if I decide next month, like, hey, I went in at the basic rate, because that was the cheapest rate today and that's what I wanted. It was cheaper than Eversource, but next month, maybe I want to go up to 30% renewable energy or 50% renewable energy, and I've got somebody I can call on the phone and say, hey, can you bump me up to that higher rate? Or 100% renewable energy. That's the bundle of services that CPCNH has arranged for us.
And what will happen as you move towards launch, you may be aware that you've developed, I think, a really good logo. You're one of our favorites. That will be Tamworth Community Power, and Tamworth Community Power will have its own web page that's managed by CPCNH, where your residents will go and it will talk Tamworth. So it won't confuse everybody with all the things that aren't appropriate here. And it'll explain very easily what you need to do in order to get in touch and opt up, opt down, opt out, opt in. Our customer service back end is domestic, and it is trained in community power. They go above and beyond. I know that a lot of customers have said, wow, I wish I could have got the answers you gave me from the utility, but we definitely do everything we can to make the experience seamless. And last night I was on a call and I heard some very positive feedback from new launch communities saying that it really has been a fairly painless experience of launching. And nothing in the world is perfect. We do depend upon the data that comes from the utility, and we're doing our best to make sure that we weed out any issues, but occasionally something happens that somebody was miscategorized. All they need to do is call and the phone number and or email. So the last pieces here, we just break out the procurement and the termination elections just to explain that we are procuring power on behalf of Tamworth. This is where it's important to bear in mind that contracts are made, promises are made, and an anticipation of Tamworth using this power. If Tamworth were to decide to exit the coalition, you would have to give notice, and it will take time, and it needs to be an orderly exit, because we can't burden those contracts on another member. We would immediately go to the market and try to resell those contracts, and there is plenty of provision for early termination, and right here, right now, you would be able to exit in a fairly simple fashion, but we can't give you any hard and fast numbers because it's a moment in time and there's so many factors that we can only just talk generally about right now. But there is a strong and orderly procedure for that.
And what's also true is that any individual in town can enter and exit at any moment that they want, and can come and go as many times as they please. So that freedom is there as an individual electricity user at any time.
Question.
Yes.
One thing that I want to clarify is in the future, would the billing be through CPCNH, or does the bill come from Eversource?
For the foreseeable future, it will come through Eversource. That's the way it's operated. Again, people won't really see much difference. There will just be, under supplier services, your power is provided by Tamworth Community Power. That's the only difference on the bill, and the lower rate. But we do have, again, verbiage in here that in some circumstances, possibly in the future, there might be a direct billing option that works better for certain classes of customers. Gabrielle touched on the fact that, the biggest problem that we have right now is that we cannot automatically enroll folks on net metering because we simply can't get the data from the utilities in a manner to give you the credits that you need to make net metering work. But we want to support net metering. We have in our policies the stated intent to be, if anything, more promoting and more, generous in terms of reimbursement than the current default from the utilities. But we are involved in legislative advocacy right now. We've had the Public Utilities Commission find in our favor, and they have basically told the utilities they need to get the mechanisms in place to get us the data. It's going to happen. I just can't tell you how quickly. But that's an example of where there is a lot of conversation about sort of separate billing that might come in the future. But anything other than the most basic service that we're offering today will be all voluntary, and it will be something that will come to you as a choice to enter into or just stay with the basic vanilla over time. We've just got a lot of options, and we have to cover all the bases in the documentation. Any other questions?
So there's a lot there. And obviously the documents, as you can see, I printed them out, they're pretty hefty. And what we would love is for you guys to, within the next 2 weeks, have a time to review it, have any legal review if you would like to have that done as well, so that we could come back in 2 weeks and that you could deliberate on the approval of it.
At that meeting on the 21st.
On the 21st. And at that point, we'll know what was the outcome of the town meeting. And so that's our request tonight. No decision tonight, but we are hoping for a decision in 2 weeks.
Okay. It will certainly be on the agenda.
And in the meantime, obviously, if there are any questions, please direct them to Gabrielle, and I'll get answers for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all the time. Appreciate it. Yeah.
It was super helpful.
All right. Thank you for coming in tonight. Moving on to updating existing planning board documents and applications.
So Sheldon asked that you all approve, I'm not sure it's necessary, but might as well do it. The planning board's going to be hiring Becky Mason, who is our webmaster, to, in a different capacity, she'll be updating these documents, and probably about 10 to 15 hours of work at $20 an hour, and the planning board would like your approval of that.
That'll
Comes
come
out of
out
their
of
budget.
It's his request, I'm honoring it.
Is the building notification form on that list? Because that's technically not,
I don't know, I don't know what's on
Probably
the
isn't.
list. No,
It's probably
I don't-
their application
no,
forms.
the building notification form
Should
would be
be.
on the planning board.
Okay.
That's a select board,
yeah.
because it's assessing,
Yep.
really.
I assume it comes out of their budget?
Yep.
not ours.
Yeah, it's, so,
Yep.
maybe just being informed is sufficient.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Okay.
would think so.
Okay.
Well,
Good.
we think it sounds great.
Moving on to the administrative report.
Bank balance is $3,725,800. I have been working on, continue to work on the Department of Revenue assessing review, which is sort of a big project this year. I have a question. Apparently there was a policy in place, the tables in the townhouse. There was a policy that we would rent tables over using the ones that are there. So I'm asking you if you want to continue that policy. It costs $140 to rent the tables. We have 16 tables over there that are available. I think the concern was they might get damaged, but I think Rick would be careful.
And couldn't we replace, for $140 to rent tables, couldn't we replace a table every year?
I didn't price one out. Melanie, who manages, friend of the townhouse, said it costs $200 to replace a table. They may have come down in price. I would say,
And would you rent them for each election, right?
yeah, so this year we'll have spent $450 unless we just have Rick move them over and bring them back. So I guess what we're saying is, would the select board approve a new policy of using those tables rather than not using them?
I would rather use them, and then if we need to replace a table every year, or every other year, whatever,
We certainly have many of them.
then we can have
Okay,
new, nice, our own tables,
Yeah.
so.
okay, so I'll have Rick use the townhouse tables.
Yeah, there's not some historical value to the
No,
tables.
they're
Okay.
plastic, they're
They're
like
like
this.
Yeah.
If he needs help moving them, tell him to give me a call.
Okay, well, thanks. Okay,
One question on that?
yeah,
Do the tables that we rent, do they drop them? Do we have to go get them, or do they drop
no,
them
they
off?
drop them off and pick them up. So it is Rick's time, but he's got the
That
time.
was just for
Yeah,
clarification.
Yeah. so it would take him, half
An
hour
hour,
each way or
yeah.
whatever.
Okay. Alright,
Okay. That's it for me.
and, sorry, spacing out for a second. Moving on to the signature file. I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 16th, 2024, as well as the meeting minutes for February 22nd, 2024.
Second.
Roll call vote.
You say yes?
Barry, yes. Schaefer, yes.
Roberts, yes. 3 yes, 0 no. I make a motion to approve the non-public meeting minutes under RSA 91-A:3 2A, Session 1, February 22nd, 2024, as well as the non-public meeting minutes under RSA 91-A:3 2A, Session 2, for February 22nd, 2024.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Do you say yes?
Barry, yes.
Schaefer, yes.
Roberts, yes. 3 yes, 0 no. I make a motion to approve the payroll manifest in the amount of $38,480.45.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Do you say yes?
Barry, yes.
Schaefer, yes.
Roberts, yes. 3 yes, 0 no.
There's also the added abatement, which you have to approve,
Okay.
which is at the top.
Yep.
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve the abatement for map 214, lot 217, sublot 1, in the amount of $31.63.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Do you say yes?
Barry, yes.
Schaefer, yes.
Roberts, yes. 3 yes, 0 no. I make a motion to approve the accounts payable in the amount of $323,841.23.
Second.
Discussion.
It's the school, ambulance, and health insurance are the big dollars.
The school payment, ambulance payment, and the health
Insurance, yeah.
Roll call vote.
Do you say yes?
Barry, yes.
Schaefer, yes.
Roberts, yes. I've been saying 3 yes here now, but that's
Yeah.
fine. 4 yes, 0 no. I can't do math tonight either. Cash used to date is $2,031,975.79. Select board update. Richard.
I had a conversation at the farmer's market, and someone asked about the lights in the parking lot. So I looked at the TCNA plan, site plan for the changes to the parking lot. So I guess they'll be adding one light because the parking lot's going to get extended out in the back because we've lost some spaces here. And I talked to Rick about how the lights currently work, and I guess they're on a timer. The timer's in the basement. We set the timer, and it goes all night. And it just seemed a little silly to me that the lights in the parking lot are on all night. I know if I lived next to it, I wouldn't want the lights on all night. It's not even necessarily a cost thing, it just would bug me. But certainly there's cost involved as well. So I asked the police chief if he had any thoughts about, why are the lights on all night? And he said he didn't care one way or the other when they were on. I asked the tax collector and others who've been here longer than I am, and nobody can understand why they're on all night. I did interact with a board member, the Barnstormers, and the latest any of their events get out is maybe 10:30 at night. I have not heard back from TCNA yet. That's an obvious, organization that uses the parking lot, but I'm guessing they're not doing much at midnight or 2 in the morning. So I'd propose we just turn the lights off at midnight or some other appropriate time and not have them run all night.
Like 11 to 4 or something, or 11 to whenever, 12 to whenever.
It just seems, A, it's a waste of money, and B, it's just annoying. And if I had known that they were on all this time, I would have said something sooner, but.
Can you get the one shut out in Chicora too?
One thing at a
we
time.
can.
So I don't know if we need like a motion or a vote or anything, but,
Maybe look,
I wouldn't think so.
so I'd say, Keats, feel free to tell Rick he can reset the timer as soon as daylight savings time and turn it off at like 11 p.m.
I think that's good.
11 p.m.?
If there's an issue, we can address it and change it.
Yeah,
Right.
It's one of the few things we have control over when the lights are on.
Okay.
That's all I got.
I have nothing to report.
Nor do I.
I attended the candidates night the other night, which I was the only one, but
Yeah.
for the select board members, but
We had a good crowd. There was like 24
Yeah.
people in the crowd.
It went well. It was my first time doing it. First time I ran was during the peak of COVID, so we didn't have a candidate that year, I don't believe. Other than that, that's about all I have to report. Public input?
Amber, were you the only one out of everybody?
Just for the select
Select board.
3 people running
Well,
for
I mean-
select board.
Steve was the other one, and he was
Yeah,
driving.
Steve was
No, I
traveling.
know
was
Steve
just.
was there, but was there anybody else running for select board that was there?
There is a 3rd person running for select board.
He wasn't there.
He wasn't there.
Nope. A couple fire
This is-
awards.
This is Maureen Diamond. If I could say a comment, I appreciated that you were there, Emery, and I thought you did a great job. The questions that came up, you handled very well. And also, Steve, your note to the audience was nicely read, as we all know that George Cleveland does that kind of stuff very well. It was kind of disappointing not to have more select board candidates available, especially the one that we don't know, or personally, I don't know. I apologize if I'm overstating it, but it was a good exercise, and I really did appreciate the efforts that you made to, present your voices. So thank you.
And George is almost as funny as Chris.
Thank you.
Moderator definitely does take a certain type of person.
Yeah.
Any other public input?
I'll just comment, the lights always used to shut off around 11 o'clock.
Oh.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Huh.
What may have happened is the timer down there runs on electricity, so if the electricity goes out,
It was just never.
it changes the whole dynamic of when the lights come on, so.
Yeah.
Comes on and goes off. So it's an easy fix, so, yeah, makes perfect sense.
Is there any other public input? Hearing no more public input, I make a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91-A :A-3 to a section 1. RSA 91-A:3 to a section 2. RSA 91-A:3 to D section 3 at
6:16.
6:16.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Did you say yes?
Barry, yes.
Schaefer, yes.
Roberts, yes. 4 yes. 0 no. We are now in non-public.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
We have to resume.
Do I sign this somewhere?
no, you don't.
Okay, perfect.
It's just, yeah.
It's 7:22.
I make a motion to come out of non-public at 7:22 p.m.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Did you say yes?
Barry, yes.
Schaefer, yes.
Roberts, yes. Minutes are not sealed. Motion to adjourn. This one took my gavel away.